All of us use shortcuts every day to make the decisions that keep our lives moving forwards, whether they're minor buying decisions or major life decisions. We don't weigh up all the pros and cons of each factor and calculate the optimal outcome. We have rules of thumb and routines which help us cut through the complexity of everyday life. Stereotypes are one kind of shortcut which help us get a handle on people we're encountering for the first time. Based on what someone looks like or what they're wearing or indeed where they come from, we can quickly create a framework of expectations. Stereotypes can be really useful, but they're also the foundation for prejudice, and they're often a huge oversimplification of what someone is really like. The German stereotype is a classic example. Germans are lauded as outstanding engineers, understanding the mechanics of things, being highly organised. But on the other side, perhaps lacking a sense of humour, being overly serious and without a strong emotional sensibility. We soon find ourselves in a classic emotional versus rational territory, and it's worth saying something about that before we comment on what we see in the response data from advertising and brand research. The idea of rational and emotional as separate and opposing forces has been a dominant part of our worldview for nearly 400 years. But in the last 15 years, as we've begun to understand more and more about the brain, it's now very clear that emotions are an essential part of good rational decision making. After all, if you don't care about the outcome of a decision, it's very unlikely you're going to make the right one. Even decisions that seem incredibly rational, such as buying a product because it's on offer, have a strong emotional component. You feel good about getting a good deal. Because that rational and emotional split has been around for so long, it's really difficult to put it to one side. We still tend to categorize emotions as irrational, the opposite of a rational force, when all the evidence points to rationality and emotions being complementary, working hand in hand, being two sides of the same coin. Keeping that in mind provides a good frame for when we look at the data for German consumers. Some of the evidence for the stereotype is very firmly here. For instance, compared with the rest of Europe, ads with news in them are stronger in Germany than they are in any other nearby country. More news-based ads appear as high-performing ads than in their neighbours. Of course, marketers are aware of the stereotype, and the evidence is there that they play towards it. Over 2/3 of ads in Germany show the product in use, a significantly higher number than the rest of Western Europe. And when we look at the drivers of brand affinity, price is a more important driver in Germany than it is in many other markets. This may be partly due to the retail context in Germany, but it is also an indication of the German mindset. So data suggests pretty clearly that German consumers like to see the way the products look, how they work, how they're consumed. They like to feel well informed in advance of making a decision. They're open to new ideas, but want to be clear about brand benefits, and price is important. In southern European countries, the inclusion of children can have a high emotional resonance, and there are many more of these ads than you might expect amongst the high-performing ads. In Spain, over 40% of high-performing ads have kids in them. In Germany, it's just above 20%. So all these things play to the stereotype, but that's not the whole picture. The strongest ads in Germany, as in the rest of the world, are engaging and entertaining, and also, like the rest of the world, ads that are dull, purely product-centered and not engaging are going to disappear without trace. If we look at just one kind of entertaining ad, ads with humour, these are used less often in Germany than they are in markets like the UK and Netherlands, where they account for nearly 2/3 of all advertising. But nevertheless, the proportion that appears in the best performing ads is relatively high. There are relatively more high-performing humorous ads as a proportion of total ads in Germany than in the UK, and certainly compared to Spain and Italy. It's also true that when it comes to choosing brands, emotional closeness to the brands is more important in Germany than many other countries, and certainly on a par with other Western European markets. So the key in Germany seems to be to get this balance clear, to be involving and engaging in creative execution, to find an emotional connection with the consumer, but at the same time to be very clear about the brand proposition. If the brand has news, you need to make sure that it's clearly conveyed for a consumer to know exactly what the brand does and what they're getting for their money. Arguably, all great advertising around the world should get the balance between these things right. A clear, competitive proposition, engagingly communicated. So that in that sense, German consumers are setting exactly the right challenges for global marketers.